Happy New Year. Welcome to the first Town Council meeting of 2014. We will open with a prayer and pledge. The next item of business on the agenda is a special joint workshop of the Town Council, the Planning Board, the School Committee, and the Budget Committee. And the topic for discussion, first of all, welcome to thank you for all being here. The first item of discussion is a discussion, vote or other action regarding school district reconfiguration. We just, for those of you who were here, heard from the school committee discussing options for how to decommission Hallowell School. That's what we're going to be doing, and how to absorb a need for classroom space. And I think that most of the council was here for that, as well as some of the other boards and commissions. But I would like to turn it to the vice chair and/or the superintendent for just to bring us back up to speed, just to remind us where we just left off, and we can continue the discussion.
Before we do that, I have to reopen our meeting because we're in recess.
Okay.
So just officially reopen our meeting at 7:17. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Lindbergh. I do believe that mostly everybody was here when we discussed. We were looking at option number 4, and I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Lindbergh.
And Ms. Lindbergh, maybe while you're just getting ready, I'll just do a quick overview for folks who haven't heard this before, put it in context, to understand the timing of decisions that we expected to be made over the next several weeks. The Town Council created a Public Facilities Advisory Task Force in May, and this group is represented by a number of stakeholders in the community, folks who represent various boards and commissions, including the school committee and the school superintendent. We're looking at a variety of buildings throughout town, both classroom buildings and non-classroom buildings, this one included, to come up with a plan for how we're going to, A, fix these buildings, better use them, because I don't know that we're really using facilities as we should. And we're looking at this as a long-term approach to address a variety of capital improvements across the town. So the goal here would be to present a comprehensive proposal before a public hearing at a town council meeting on February 3rd. That's when the plan will be presented. Folks can comment on it, what they like about it, what they don't like about it. All with the goal of the council deciding whether to put it before voters in November of this year as a referendum with a price tag. So here's what we're proposing, here's what it would cost, and expect it on the ballot in November. In order for us to have it on the ballot in November, we have to submit legislation to the General Assembly for permission to put it on the ballot. Technically, the deadline for submitting legislation to the General Assembly is February 14th. I think that there's some flexibility there. There's certainly bills that have been introduced past February 14th, but we've been working according to that deadline time frame. So as this task force has been doing its work, one of the things that we've said right along is that we can't really present a comprehensive proposal on all these facilities without addressing Hallowell. And so we need to understand, what is the target date for decommissioning Hallowell, assuming that I think that there's a consensus that we're not planning to put a whole lot more capital improvements into a school that is as old as it is, and it doesn't really meet the needs educationally and safety issues and so on and so forth. So that's the context that we're having this discussion, and was driving the timetable for coming to some conclusions about how best to
recap, I guess I'll start by focusing on the options that were eliminated previously, kind of confirm with the school committee that they are still eliminated, and the options that they had eliminated in the past were pre-K and K at the high school with 9 through 12, grade 4 and 5 at the high school with 9 through 12, and pre-K at the middle school with 6, 8. And the third option that they previously eliminated was pre-K at the high school with grades 8 through 12 and grades 4 through 7 at the middle school, splitting up the middle school model. The option being considered tonight that they requested that we unpack further with the help of the consultant is looking at moving grade 4, so all of grade 3 and grade 4 would be at NSCS Elementary. So that would be preschool through grade 4. Middle school would be grades 5 through 8. High school would stay 9 through 12. The issues that they want further unpacked have to do with space, quality, quantity, and educational programming. We want to make sure that whether it's 4 portables or 4 permanent classrooms, that there's still enough adequate space in terms of how we're going to handle 5 lunches, and whether lunches can be combined at the elementary level. We have to look at the sufficient space for a computer lab for 600 kids. And there's some specialist areas that we have to look at. That's at NSCS. In order for grade 5 to be part of the middle school, 5, 6, 7, and 8, Ms. Lahar has requested that the Family and Consumer Science Lab that was originally part of the middle school, but was reduced primarily for funding. That's an oversized classroom on the second floor. He's requesting that that be split into 2 rooms so that he would be ensured to have adequate space should he be able to add programming. But other than cultural issues, he believes he can accommodate grades 5 through 8 at the middle school. So the task really at hand is for us to move as quickly as we can with the consultant to unpack the issues the school committee asked for more information. School committee, does that sum it up okay?
Thank you very much. So, I was here for the entire presentation, and by the way, just for disclosure, I do chair the task force we've been talking about, facilities task force. And as we think about the options, I wonder whether the school committee is open to revisiting some options that have previously been taken off the table. I'm just asking because I think I should at least ask the question. I don't think that our primary goal should be to avoid at any cost the expense of building additional space if we need it. But I do think that we should at least have that discussion. And if it's the school committee's decision that it doesn't want to revisit either of those options, then that's fine. But I think that I want to at least ask the question.
At this point, I think we've had since last March, when we first heard the options that were given for us.
Actually, it was before last month. Yeah, that's
Most members of the school committee, looked at all of the options originally when it was first presented to us, when the original task force that researched it. With discussions with the superintendent and discussions with that task force, we have, really thoroughly done our research and come to the conclusion that the best possible option, the best option would be to build a whole brand new elementary school. We know that's not an option. So the next best option, programming-wise, for the children of this town, would be option number 4. And consulting with our administrators, our superintendent, and just in the best interest of the kids, I think that option number 4 is the best option to go with at this point. Just my opinion.
Okay, if I could add that very briefly, I agree with we're going to. I think Vice Chairperson Otis stated it very well. One of the things when you said consider new options, I think one of the bases to consider new options would be if there's new information presented, and that's one of the reasons, like we specifically asked directly the superintendent to find out. For example, one of the real issues about this is programming to schools. Another issue is the issue of would we use the idea of modular classrooms, and If so, how much do those cost? Getting that information may be the kind of new information that, when we get that information, that may be a basis to revisit some other things. So right now, I agree with Vice Chair, I think our sentiment is, let's get all the information on that. That seems to be the option we're looking at again is that option number 4, which again is the fifth grade up to middle school before down to elementary school. So I just wondered, did you have some specific information that you were basing this recommendation?
Well, the thing that I was wondering about is the option of, and I understand that this does work in other districts, so that's why I'm sort of inquisitive about it. The option of having pre-K and K in a wing at the high school is one that we talked about. And there's a variety of benefits to that. There's also some drawbacks to it. And I'm looking at it more in the context of this whole package, because eventually we're going to be putting before the voters of the town a bond to take care of a number of different buildings. And so I just want to be realistic about what we're aiming for, because I wouldn't want the bond amount to be such that the whole thing gets sunk. And so I want to ask that question, because maybe that's not the preference, but maybe you can tell me something that I don't know about why that wouldn't be a very good option. And why it wouldn't be, and I'm open to hearing that.
I'm gonna turn your question over to Mr. Lindberg, because I think that you might be able to shed some light as to why pre-K and K may not work at the high school.
So when we unpacked this, Mr. Flaherty, over a year ago, we went into great detail. When we look at the high school housing pre-K through K, you're potentially looking at taking over a complete wing of the high school that would be taken off the rolls for any future programming. Basically looking at 10 plus rooms, 6 kindergarten classrooms, 2 preschool rooms, 1 classroom, half of which we think would have to be renovated for bathrooms, because there's no way they're going to use the bathrooms at the high school, and there's so few of them to begin with. So they're going to have bathrooms constructed for kindergartens and preschools. You're going to have to use the other half space for some type of office of director, because you're going to have close to 200, a little under 200 little ones from 3 to 5. It would be fun. 1 classroom would be required for special services, because again, these children will receive special ed, they'll receive speech and language, OT, PT, counseling services are involved. You need space for specialists to do assessments, to have meetings with parents on IEPs. The classrooms would have to be located as closely to the office as possible, because we know that the little ones see the nurses a lot, and sometimes they can't make it through the day making it to the bathroom, and so they visit the nurse a lot. And so we looked at this on the layout of the high school. Basically, it would take the whole wing as you enter the main lobby of the high school and go straight past the gym. It would take that whole first floor, and there still wouldn't be enough space. So you get into the cost of accommodating them, cost of staffing, and I'm not sure it's the best short-term solution, but the other fun questions would be, where would they get their physical education? Where would they eat their lunch? Where would they get their art, their music? Where would they recess? So they're all kind of fun questions to ask, and we don't have those answers. Honestly, it's a great concept if you built a wing or you were designing a new school with that in mind. To have an early childhood center would be awesome, but to place it in the existing high school and for them to lose that many rooms of programming, plus I think, I'm not an architect or an engineer, but I think the cost would be pretty prohibitive. So that's like kind of a nutshell. Rob, anything that you want to add to that? Does that help?
It does help, and I'd like to dig a little bit deeper into it, because it was, I presume, it was one of the recommendations that came from the consultant when they did their analysis, and they are architects, so it wasn't like it was a recommendation completely out of left field, and it might be interesting to compare the cost of retrofitting that space, if it exists, with the cost of building and adding on space at NSCS. So
It was not an option that came from the architect or the engineering firm. It was one that they helped unpack, but it was not offered by them. So it was one of a whole bunch of short-term potential solutions that had to be unpacked that was offered by NESDEC, but none of which they weighed in on, other than, you could consider this. So it was unpacked by the school committee, by administration, and by the architect and engineer, and it's detailed, I think, in the previous school buildings task force report. But basically, those are the reasons why I think the committee decided to eliminate it from the get-go.
Any questions to you, council?
You pretty much covered it. There's really not much more to add.
I do think that the educational experts in the room have unpacked that,
Okay.
and it's just not a great option.
I'm willing to accept that. I
It would
just
take us-
wanted to have,
It would just take us,
dialogue.
it would take us a little more time to do a cost analysis on that option, as well as option number 4, which those people that are, are educational experts are telling us is the best way to go.
And, again, on timing issues, so that everyone understands this thing of getting the bill introduced, get it on a ballot, and so forth. We have, the next opportunity after November would be November of 2016. So that's what's really driving the need to come to a conclusion.
Just one question though, I also serve the task force with you and you the chair, you and Joe, by the way. But I just want to clarify, I'll ask, the whole issue of housing doesn't have to actually be included in the bond language per se, right? In other words, decommissioning housing does not have to be part of the bond, right? Correct?
It doesn't have to be part of the bond, but I think the way that we presented it to the community is that we wouldn't present a comprehensive proposal without it addressing Howard.
Right.
Because I think that the idea is that when we bring it to the community, is to say, we're not coming back in 5 years with something else, we're not coming back in 10 years. This is intended to see us through a much longer horizon. So I would want to be sure that Howard was part of it. And the other part of it is just that we've got some capital issues that may have to be addressed at Howell in the short term. And so understanding what the drop dead decommission date is will be very helpful in deciding how far to take some of those projects.
Are we in that questions?
Sure, this is a joint meeting.
I don't know how many of you have read the report that came out of the Department of Education recently. I did send the link to some people. It's a comprehensive report about the state of our schools in the state. And it deals largely with the declining enrollment projections statewide and what to do about that problem and how to utilize space efficiency. And when you reconfigure, you have to take into account the inefficiency of operating buildings that are running at 50% capacity. If you go online and read that report, you're going to be absolutely astounded at how inefficient the space is allocated. And with the declining enrollment projected by everybody and their brother, as far as statewide and within the town, it's kind of laughable that we're not trying to find a solution that will better utilize all of our spaces, and that we're talking about renting modular classrooms or building more rooms, when we're not using the rooms that we have currently to full capacity, not even near full capacity. The report from RIDE that is on the website for RIDE, if you want to read it, or if anybody wants the link, I'll be happy to mail it, send it to them, shows the capacity. Well, it shows, first of all, that we're projected to lose 153 students for the year 2016-17.
Is that for North Smithfield?
That's for North Smithfield. That's an 8.9% decline in enrollment. The RIDE numbers suggest that by 2021 and 22, we'll have lost 252 students, or a decline in enrollment of 14.7%. Now, when you look at that, it listed all the buildings in North Smithfield in this report. And all of them, except, they rated the buildings 1 through 4 based on the state of the building, the physical square footage, the state-of-the-art facility, and I believe all of our buildings, except for Hollowell, got rated a 1 in that report done by the consultants who did this report for RIDE, meaning state-of-the-art, plenty of room, operating nicely. Hollowell got a 4. No surprise to anybody in the room, I think. But it also listed, interestingly, the square footage of each building and the occupancy currently in each building and the square footage per student. And I think something that we're missing here in the solution is, in the NESDIC report that was drafted in 2009, and in the state report, and every other report I've looked at, it kind of suggests that the high school is, I believe the high, in NESDIC in 2009, even referred to that building as the most underutilized building offering space in the district, and that we needed to do something to utilize that space more efficiently. And the capacity of that building in the state report is listed at 690, and they're saying that the enrollment at the time this report was done was 532, okay? The square footage was 273 square feet per student, which was like the highest, one of the highest numbers in the state of all the high schools, because this report has the statistics from every single high school. So they're basically saying in the state report and in the NESDIC 2009 report that we're not utilizing that space efficiently. Now, the NESDIC people projected in 2009, and they've done the projection reports for the school districts many years since 2009, but interestingly, their 2009 report, which is in the NESDIC report, which is on the school department's website if you want to read it, if you go to that table, they projected in 2009 when they did this enrollment analysis that for the year 2013-14, we have 1,728 students in the district. I believe we have 1,727, one less than what they projected. Now, the distribution by grade level isn't right on the money, but their projections that were done earlier are more accurate than the more recent projections that they've done. They also, if you look at their latest projection, or the one that I have that I think, I'm not sure if the school department has a more current one, every time I've seen it on an agenda, I've asked for a copy of it, and I did have this one that's dated 1/17/2013, and they project that by the school year 22-23, which is not that far away, folks, the enrollment pre-K to K will be down to 1,582 students. That's a decline of 155. If you just look at the K through 12, they're projecting a decline of 165, I'm sorry. But they also break it down by the grade levels. And by that year, they predict that the high school enrollment will be 451 kids. In a building that one consultant said the capacity of the building is 690, and another consultant, the NESDIC group, came in and said the capacity is over 800. So we're going to be operating a building at about 50% capacity if these numbers are correct, okay? Now, Mr. Lindbergh picked up on a statement that was in the NESDIC report, and I agree wholeheartedly with it. That report stresses you have to be just as worried that your projections are going to be lower by 10% as you are worried that the projections are going to be over by 10%. Because every time you run an inefficient building, your operating costs go through the roof. You know, I was a teacher for 33 years. I was actually in guidance and counseling. I did scheduling at the high school and the middle school, half my career at each. I worked at a beautiful middle school that was built by the taxpayers of the town of Barberville, and I think this is kind of common throughout the state. It had state-of-the-art facilities in every area you could. It had 3 home economics rooms, 2 industrial arts classrooms, multiple computer rooms. And what happened was, shortly after it opened, the operating costs for the school district escalated beyond belief, and now those 3 home economics rooms are no longer home economics rooms. The 2 industrial arts rooms are storage rooms, and we have no programs. I'd like the solution that anybody comes up with to focus on how are we going to use the space efficiently so that we have the money in the operating budget to offer programs of quality. I don't care if my kid went to school in a beautiful building. I want my kid to be exposed to great programs. It's the program that makes the quality of the education, not the building. I don't think anybody who's sending their kid to LaSalle or Mount St. Charles or Moses Brown is paying the tuition to send their kid to those facilities because of the state-of-the-art building. They're sending their kids to that facility because of the programs that are offered in those old buildings. So I really think we should, you can't, I don't see how personally you can come up with a proposal that completely fails to address the information said in 2009, that's an issue that we need to look at, is how are you going to utilize that space in the high school that's currently utilized? And in particular, when you look at how further the enrollment is going to be dropping.
Mike, if I can interject, I want to try to keep us.
I'm going to be wrapped up in 1 minute.
All right.
The second thing is, from a scheduling standpoint, I'm looking at the number of 451 in a high school, 9 through 12. That's going to end up being about one of the smaller high schools in the state. I think Situate has the smallest currently. But I don't know how, when you have 100 kids per grade level, you're going to find 8 kids who are, hopefully qualified to take an AP course in calculus and an AP course in English. And you're not going to have a population that you're going to be able to offer those AP courses to because your enrollment numbers are so low. You don't utilize staff well.
I'm going to interject because
Okay.
it wasn't my intention to get this deep into the weeds on this
Okay,
discussion tonight.
I'm sorry, I just want to reiterate, all I'm asking is that please, could we look at using the buildings efficiently in whatever proposal comes out of this?
And I'll tell you, from my perspective, I want us as a community to win at this. And I mentioned just a little while ago that we're going to be presenting this comprehensive package before a public hearing at town council on, presumably on February 3rd. That could be rescheduled, but that's the target date. And that's the opportunity for everybody throughout the town to step forward and say what they like and what they don't like about it. And so from my perspective, I'd like to see a proposal make its way through the process that's strong and to withstand the difficult questions that are going to be asked regardless of what proposal gets put forward. We have what I think is one bite at this apple. We're either going to make it work or we're not. And that was really the impetus for my question, just asking first, would you be looking at some of those other options? And if it's your determination that the answer to that is no, I accept that. But I have to ask that question so that when we get through the process of the public hearing, we'll have already discussed this. You bring up some valid numbers, and those are going to be likely the same kind of numbers that are going to surface in the public hearing. I just want to make sure that whatever we have as a joint proposal for this, because this is across the town, that it's going to work.
I'd just like to put in one last plug. I beg everybody to go to the Department of Ed website and download that report and read it, because you might have an entirely different opinion after you read the logic included in that report, even as far as the aspects of programming.
So the
Quality of programming.
The school committee has given direction to the superintendent. They're going to unpack the options that have been discussed and be working toward a more formal recommendation for how it proposes to deal with the Hallowell situation, and we will cross that bridge when we get to it. My only advice is just to not overreach so that we end up having a package that is something that the community can accept.
Mr. Flanagan, if you want, you could set a separate night aside to discuss the programming at the high school, because you're not going to resolve it tonight. We had input into the report Mr. Clifford's cited. The report, I think now is it 2 years old or a year old? I think the data we supplied was a couple of years ago, and they pulled together the report. The best person to actually explain planned operating capacity, preferred operating capacity, and current operating capacity is your consultant. Your capacity, your preferred, or your plan changes with your configuration and with the services you're offering. For instance, years ago, NSES, its operating capacity was much higher before it had 2 preschools and before it introduced special ed programs. So things like that drive down your capacity in your estimates. So really there's a lot of information that goes into the capacity of a school that you can't cover tonight without the help of a consultant. I'm not going to get up here and tell you that I think what that report from the state does, it doesn't do. Some aspects of it is very stable, some are very unstable. Their enrollment projections are very unstable. They're very unstable. I would nowhere near in the world ever predict to do building or planning in this day and age with a 9-year-old out projection. It's not reliable. And we can see that by the last 3 years of NESDEC. 1 year out, they've been off the last 3 years. And so that tells me that their old projections of us having a substantial decline in enrollment are questionable at the least. So what they say over and over again is we're primed for a turnaround, and we need to watch that. So that's my 2 cents.
Madam Administrator.
Yes, if I may, I just wanted to, the school department did provide us with a capital budget again this year, and we were talking about how well and what things we need to do to keep it up to code and the kids safe during the time period that it is existing at the school. And just to let people know, there's a $13.8 million request for upgrades at Howard. 2.36, 2 million, 3 for this year, 4 million, 8, 2 million for year 3, 3 million, 4 for year 4, and $1 million, 1 for year 5. So when we're considering what we're going to do with all these buildings, we have to look at these things because, to your point, Mr. Flaherty, if these things are life safety issues, if some of these things are necessary for us to continue utilizing this facility, even on a short-term basis, that may be money not well spent. So when you're looking at $13.8 million for a 60-year-old, 60 now? I don't know, all my kids went there and they're pretty old.
It's old.
How old, sir?
It's old.
It's old.
Yeah, I'm 50.
Yeah, right, so maybe it's 60. But that's what we really have to talk about is like, do we want to put that kind of money or any kind of money, $2 million for this year is the request, 2.3. And that's pretty disturbing as a capital request. I would think if there's another option that we can utilize more spend.
So, Mr. Chair, I don't know whether the school committee would agree with me or not, or fire shots at me later. I really agree with the town administrator. We bring forward those requests because we're obligated to. We have to let you know of the improvements or the requests to improve that site. In the last 8 years, I don't think there's been a dollar committed, and I could be wrong, it could be 6 years from the town's capital funding towards doing anything in Hallowell. And I get that. I really get that, because no decision has been made. And honestly, she's right. You have to think about $3 million just to bring it up to where it should be, and I guess the other 8 if you're going to redo everything. And I agree, it's not money well spent, but we have to be careful of the alternative. I don't want to box kids in, and I don't want to box that high school in such a way that they lose 10 rooms. So
You
we could
mentioned
keep going.
having a more detailed meeting on this subject by itself. Would you just advise us when that's going to occur so that we could attend if we'd like to?
Well, I think the next meeting for the school committee, whether it's an additional meeting on the 21st, we're trying to meet your request, and that is for them to actually take a vote on the option. But in the meantime, they've given me direction to unpack it with your consultant. So we were going to get going on that option. So
remember we talked about the February 14th deadline for introducing. We know that there's a little bit of flexibility there.
Yeah.
This is a great example of where we might want to exercise that flexibility and say that maybe February 3rd is not the right date for the public hearing, and if having an extra 3 weeks or a month would be useful for this process, because this is a very, very important process that you're indicating. And if that would be useful, just speaking for myself, I'd be open to pushing that forward.
I would leave it up to the committee. Don't forget, they spent a fair amount of time on it last March, and they had a school buildings task force that was authorized by the town council and funded, and they did their due diligence, and they really unpacked these. And so, the issue that I'm hearing pushed is that we'll do something at the high school, and I'm leery of that right now, because that something is either pre-K, or I know someone brought up last March that dismantle the middle school, move grade 8 over there. And I think that was overwhelmingly addressed by the administrators, teachers, and even you can have the kids address it if you want. We really want to keep the middle school intact. So there are also, Mr. President, there are also issues with regard to a lack of programming at the high school for funding reasons. And Mr. Mezzanotte and Mr. Pepin and Mr. McGee have plans, especially for career-based programs, that should we get the funding, we would expand our program at the high school. So I don't want to rule that out, and we're also looking at an ALP or alternative learning program at the high school for kids that are potential dropouts. So the space isn't really underutilized now, and I have a breakdown of it, and we'll kind of go from there. But thank you for allowing me to respond.
Are there any questions from the council?
I just want to say, I really hate the idea of putting preschool and pre-K, K and pre-K together with the high school, with a wing. I think it's going to cost a lot of money, and it's not right to put little kids like that with the high school. I think that's the worst scenario we could ever do. And, you know, I just want to put my opinion. I wouldn't even waste time on that, in my opinion.
Mr. Chair, I know we're here. I don't want to speak to the entire board, but I can tell you that the school committee, but we've certainly talked about it, and again, we think option 4 is probably a vital option for the time to look at, and that's why we're giving our focus on that. And I just want to emphasize also, we're aware of the timetables of the task force is under, and I've been with you, and we're pretty on it, we're aware of that. Obviously, we're trying to balance the needs of the children and our town, we're trying to move forward best, and that's where we're at. Again, I think, and you be at the last meeting, all you heard, find out what modular classroom, that's almost like a way, modular classrooms are not saying something we're going with. We need to get the information on that to determine whether or not it's still viable. And it's, yes, it's more a population issue then. So the information we're looking for is something we need to get. We're aware of the timeframes and so I think we're all going to work the best we can to try and meet the timetables and meet the system.
We're ready to move on to the next item. Is there any other questions from the council? Okay, so we'll move on to item D, part of the joint workshop, which is discussion, vote, or other action regarding townwide capital budget planning. We put this on the agenda because we've had over the years a lot of capital needs expressed. There's a provision within the charter for how capital budget gets done, and often I think that over at least the last couple of years, the planning board has not recommended a whole lot, and I think in part because of the process, and so we thought it would be a very good idea to have this discussion with all the boards. I'm going to turn it to the town administrator for an explanation about how the capital process is supposed to work, and then the planner can chime in and we can ask questions.
Thank you. I just want to go over a little bit from a memo that I will not take credit for, Mr. Erickson devised, but just to let everyone know about the capital budget process as it's now defined in the charter. We have several articles. One is capital budget. The planning board shall prepare and recommend to the town council a capital budget for the following year and a comprehensive 6-year capital improvement plan on an annual basis. 6 years is a long time. Maybe we won't look at that. The next article is Article 3, capital budget consideration. All capital budget requests shall be submitted to the planning board by the second Monday in January. The planning board or the town planner, as its designee, shall make its recommendation to the budget committee by March 1. Rhode Island General Laws 45-22-7, when directed by the city or town council or by the appointing authority, a planning board or commission shall prepare an annual capital budget and a comprehensive long-range capital improvement program for submission to the council, the appointing authority, or other designated official or agency. Now, we do have a charter review committee that has been appointed. Actually, the town council has appointed themselves as the charter review and taken many charter review recommendations over the years into consideration. And one of them was the charter revision, if we wanted to, can remove the capital budgeting function from the planning board and give it directly to the expanded budget board or the budget committee. In Lincoln, for instance, Mr. Erickson said that there are 11 members on the budget board and at least 3 members work on the capital budget alone. And this design allows better understanding and coordination of the relationships between capital and operating budgets. Because right now, I think a lot of times what we've done over the last few years, actually during several years in the recent past, we've made very few recommendations, and that's because we had very little money. It wasn't because we didn't think anything was worthwhile. And I think that's very important, that there were very few capital recommendations made across the board. So it can, back to this recommendation, it could be something that we look at, planning board, if that's something, budget committee, that you're interested in looking at as a charter change. However, what we have right now is some information that we need from every person that submits a budget, a capital budget item to us. We want, what information do we have on the item, and similar items. We want cost estimates. We want recent maintenance reports. Is there an alternative way of achieving the needed result? Can we use something else? You know, we don't want you just to get a bunch of numbers and a bunch of, you know, this is going to cost $200,000 and we need this because. We want to know why you need it. You know, like if you need, for instance, you know, one of the things we went over this day with the budget committee and the planner and the department heads was, okay, we have some capital here. The police chief needs a car and a vehicle, okay? Why? So he's going to tell us why he needs that car, how long it's been on the road, what it's used for, what its actual lifespan would normally be, if there were any extenuating circumstances that would, you know, require that he get something more quickly than usual. Is it the best possible investment? Do you want to go out and buy a car? Should we lease a car? Can we go somewhere else? What happens after it's taken off the road? Is it sold? Is it junked? Does it bring us any revenue? All those things have to be done and considered as part of a capital project before anybody presents to the planning board, because what they're doing is just getting a bunch of numbers right now, basically, or wish lists, or things that you think are important. And, you know, like everybody thinks that things are important. The capital planning budget for the school department comes in every year in this white binder and has a number of, as Mr. Lindbergh said, things that are what he considers that need to be done. They're not prioritized as far as I can see. And there isn't any backup. There are no maintenance things. There are no invoices. There's nothing that you go out to bid for. There's no 3 quotes. There's nothing that would require, that would, if I looked at it from, you know, with a new set of eyes and I were looking at it as a planning board member without any background, without having attended meetings, without anything else, I would be hard pressed to make a decision to do something on the capital need without all that information being presented to me. So what we're going to do is try to ramp up all the things that back up the information, and what I told all the department heads today, and school department, and school committee as well. You have to make a case. You have to present the case. You have to be the attorney on, you know, on the dais, trying to sell that to the jury that this is something that you really need, because it's too important for us to not pay attention to some of these capital needs that have been going on for several years. And then we get to a place where we need an emergency purchase because we haven't done these things. So what we're going to try to do is really reel in and fine-tune this process and make sure that we have enough information so that we make a decision and any one of the residents can come in and ask Brenda if she has the report for such and such, and it should have backup and backup and backup all stapled to it. So they will know where their money is going. And I think that's important.
So the reason this was on the agenda tonight is so that we could, you know, prospectively, going forward, make sure that we have our capital process working really for the town. Because there are things that do need to be done. And in some cases, they might not have been recommended because perhaps the planning board felt that there wasn't sufficient information, and we're trying to just break down those silos. I know that your process begins, I think, right in January, beginning to meet with town departments at your regular meetings. In fact, I think that the school committee is already booked for January 16th, if I'm not mistaken, and will be presenting. So I don't know if, turn to the planning board chair, Mr. Naylor, if you just have any thoughts about the process going forward, and perhaps if anybody has any questions, This is really so that folks understand what's going to be expected as the process unfolds.
My comments on the process are at least what has happened over the last 4 or 5 years. One, as the administrator has said, there have been a number of years where we didn't have any money, and yet the planning board was still required to go through this process, which is time-consuming and lengthy for what we all sort of knew in the back of our heads was a futile exercise. And to make any recommendations when we had no money was basically not a good use of time. Secondly, as the administrator has very nicely stated, was what we received from different departments was very frustrating, because there was not justification, there was not the due diligence put in for investigating different options for what they were requesting. And departments across the town would give us material that were in all different formats. So there was never a standard format or a standard justification for what they were asking. Initially, back, I would say when I was first on the planning board, representatives from departments would actually come and do presentations. More recently, that has not happened. Basically, we get what they present to us, which is very minimal, and there is no one there to represent what they are asking for and providing any justification. As I recall, the school committee, the white binder, last time we received that, I want to say was probably 3 or 4 years ago, and that was the last time that the school committee did come before the planning board and provide any justification. So overall, my evaluation over the last 5 years is there's been a little bit of an eroding of the process by really non-participation on the part of departments within the town. And I agree with everything that the administrator says, is we were really looking for justification and really prioritization of what they were asking for. Why did they need it, and how immediate and crucial we need it. And again, that's been a failure of the process so far.
So the administrator made a reference to a possible charter amendment that would have the budget committee take over some of the responsibility of doing capital. Even if that were to go forward as a question, it wouldn't take effect until the following year. However, the budget committee has indicated an interest in assisting the planning board in that process, should the planning board be interested in helping, in the help.
Mr. Zambrano, one of our budget committee members, is here this evening. He had an executive board meeting for the housing authority that he oversees. He's the executive director of the Yaleborough Housing Authority. It's an extremely large public housing authority, and this is his area of expertise. And we only acted on the recommendations that were forwarded from the planning board because we weren't privy to the conversations that had, or lack of meetings either. But anyway, when we were discussing it during the last budget season, his thing is, and I don't know if I'm going to paraphrase accurately what he suggested, but it seemed like in layman's terms, what he was saying was, there's a whole component of capital budgeting that's missing here. There's supposed to be an asset inventory in place with the projected lifespan of every type of asset. If you have a police car, it's projected out that it's going to last 6 years. If you have a snowplow, it's projected out it lasts 12 years. There shouldn't be any surprises coming up in a capital budget plan. It should be cyclical. It should be, in 12 years you need to budget for this. And he's frustrated that that doesn't exist, because that would make the whole capital budget process flow much more easily. Secondly, he was in agreement with the budget committee of the lack of details. And I mean, he just looked at a couple of things on those pages and started rattling off a list of questions a mile long and totally lost me within 3 minutes. But I mean, he seemed to make the point that there's not a lot of detail there. Like, even renovating the labs and then the dollar amount. Well, how many toilets is that? How many sinks is that? He wants the details. And so that's a big part of what's missing in that capital project. The budget committee was asked to review the charter revisions for Articles 3 and 8, and in one of those articles is the capital budgeting plan. And Ms. Alves is the liaison to the budget committee, and she's working on the council as drafting those language changes. So she and I have spoken a number of times and emailed back and forth. We put together a draft proposal to send to her, she reviewed, and then the budget committee reviewed it the other night at our meeting. But in that budget draft, we're suggesting something opposite to what Mr. Erickson promoted. We're actually suggesting that we take the capital budgets earlier in the budgeting season. If we're going to be pushing back the due dates for the operating budgets, then let's move up the due dates for the capital budget. It's not so subjective, it's easy to plan for, and we could have the capital budget submitted in November rather than January. And from November to the end of January, we could work on capital budgets, and then when we get the operating budgets later in the year, starting in February, we work on the operating budget, the capital budget, and the operating budget, I'm sorry. And having dealt with the capital budget first, we might have some idea of dollars that we're looking at, so when we review the operating budgets, we're going to try to make the two mesh. But it does seem like the way that it's happened this way, with the lack of detail and examination of the capital budget until the last minute, that it hasn't been funded appropriately because of all.
Anybody following all this discussion, you can tell there's an awful lot of moving parts to this. And so tonight isn't about, why isn't it working, or who's not doing it. This is about how do we get it fixed going forward, and have a strong capital process. I do want to defer to town planning, because I know that we've talked about the software program that you are currently using that I think addresses a lot of the issues that you just raised, Mr. Clifford.
First of all, I want to say, I agree with Mike Clifford's proposal. I think that's a good alternative. In Lincoln, there's a capital development committee that meets all year round on specific projects. But you could do it that way. We would just go, from November to November or October 31st when you put down your mileage for your vehicles. But I do want to point out that most planners are not trained in capital budgeting. Surprise. And most towns on Rhode Island do not have the planning board doing capital budgeting. Imagine 2009 when we were meeting 2 and 3 times a month with intense homework on Dowling Village. Huge project, way too large for a planning board in a small town to handle, but we did it anyway. And there was no time and there was no money to do that kind of planning at the same time, capital planning at the same time. I would prefer in the long run to see it all shifted to a larger budgeting committee and have a year-round process of capital. But having said that, this year we are going to focus on asset management tables, the idea of how long is it going to last, what systems we have in place to make it last. We don't know what the maintenance cost is for any given vehicle because we don't have a work order system. We're starting up facilities room, which will allow us to track work orders and schedule everything that way so we can go back, just run a report so it all fits together with the spreadsheet that was done. And if we can do that, we'll have a much better handle on what the real long-term needs are. Just because you don't have a capital request this year doesn't mean that we don't need that whole, for the school department, for the police department, for DPW, we need a complete overview and with all the specifics on it. And the same way with other capital assets.
I just wanted to, I think Mr. Lindbergh's been waiting, just wanted to recognize him.
Thanks, Mr. Flaherty. I agree with Mr. Erickson. I think capital planning should be year-round, and especially getting the requests in earlier, much earlier, even in the fall, to begin to discuss. But whatever board you decide, I think is the right way to go. The boards don't matter to me, it's the communication. I just want to point out a couple of things because there was an example brought up that I'd like to point out, if I may. When you went about the public facility task force group, you went about it really well, professionally. You looked at your existing buildings and you got what I believe was really a comprehensive report about your existing conditions, did you not?
Yes.
That gave you some insight, I believe, some really good insight. And that insight came from an architect and engineering firm. When the book is held up as what we submit, and by the way, we've submitted this every year for the last 6 years. This book, so to speak, of our capital needs was based on the same thing. We went out and contracted for an architectural and engineering firm, because I agree with Mr. Erickson. Who are we to decide exactly the extent of our capital requests? I mean, I have faith in Mr. Kopaz, I have faith in myself, I have faith in other people to give me their input. But in actuality, we should really all be doing an existing conditions report. And that's what we did. And we paid money for that, and that's been our guide. And the detail has been amazing. To that end, I just want to pass this book around, because you're going to see an incredible amount of detail backing it up. Now, granted, it's not from 3 contractors or vendors, or no disrespect, 3 plumbing people. It's from an architect and an engineer who basically went in and took a look at all of our buildings and coded these. They coded them as 1, immediate action required; 2, action required 1 to 5 years; 3, required 5+ years; and 4, monitor. They also coded them according to safety, health issues, maintenance, asset protection, accessibility, energy efficiency, programming issues. We used this that we created back in 2008 with an advisory group, and it has been our working plan. It is what the Department of Ed recognized as the most exemplary capital plan that they have seen from any district in the state. It's what we use to do the performance-based contract to help ourselves out. The justifications are clear and come from an architect and an engineer. The backup is there. It's not 3 quotes from 3, sorry Tommy, plumbing contractors, but it's quotes and justifications from people that know buildings better than we do. And so to that end, I think it's probably one of the best that's ever been done. In terms of presenting it, we gladly would meet with the planning board. No disrespect, I don't know when the last time it was that we were invited. We're invited this year, gonna be there January 16th, and if we can do something that improves the communication or presents it better, fine, but it's a pretty thorough report.
Can I follow up on a point with the planning board? The issue of the architect's estimate, do you perceive that to be adequate? Or do you believe that for some reason that there does need to be 3 cost estimates? Because this sounds like an issue that's going to need to get resolved, but just like your thought, and then I'm going to come right back.
I want to follow up on the cost estimate. You could blame it.
Yes.
I'll, if I may, I don't know that we've ever received nothing. So, and forgive me, it's up to the department coming to us as a board to get on the agenda. It's not up to us to invite you in. Before, I've been since 2009, haven't seen the school department, haven't seen the police department, came in, I think, in 09 or 10. I don't know where the communication broke down in town, but it broke. Cost estimates, I'm not even gonna, you could go the hard route and go, we need 3 for every, set a threshold. If it's a project under 10,000, who cares? If it's, $80,000 boiler, like we just approved here, maybe you need 2, maybe you need 3. I don't know what that threshold is, that's for everyone to decide.
Well,
Somebody who's smarter than you.
I may tell you, I'm not smarter than you, but it is that we have a $5,000, anything over by charter, we have to go out to bid. So it's $5,001, we have to go out and formalize the bid process, not just 3 quotes, so.
And I'm not stating that anyone
No,
hasn't
right.
had the information, but the communication.
Right.
You may have had that report.
I'm gonna for this moment. One thing I want to try to, because we've got a lot of people here, and I would just ask for your indulgence in directing communication through one person, because I think that if it's a process, it's going to be. But I would like to turn to Councilor Zawinski.
Well, reminiscent, I started serving the town as a planning board member, came to town planner. We had a process. We had fleet management, prior to leasing police cars. We would have a list of, I'm using just the police department, we'd have a list of how many vehicles they had. We'd look at the ratio of police officers to vehicles, how many miles were put in that particular year. And now we lease police vehicles, but we were very cognizant of the fact, and we came up with Chief Reynolds actually helped us out on this one, three new cars one year, two the next. Those vehicles got, decaled, and turned down to whether it be the planning director of planning, the zoning official. Those vehicles were kept in-house. But they had seen the life expectancy where you would not have a police officer trying to get on the highway doing a high speed one of those days. Were they safe? Yeah, but not to the point they were safe enough for police officers. So we used to look at this, but we started receiving that information in December. So now you guys are off to January. I understand you went through some major developments. We didn't have the huge developments like Darwin Village, but it was part of planning's responsibility as in the town charter to do this and make recommendations to the budget committee. I really, I'm open to whatever if the planning board is to the point now where they're busy reviewing plans, and they feel that it would be best served by folks that really are more, I don't want to say this in bad terms, more number crunchers, that understand it a little more. But I'm very happy with that if the budget committee wishes to assume that responsibility. But somebody in this town has to take that responsibility. There has to be reporting down on a timely basis, these reports for capital budget. I can remember the Potenza Auditorium looking for curtains for 5 years. I don't know if anybody's been around that long, but for 5 years, they were looking, 5 years. Do you remember that guy? 5 years, and for some reason it never got approved, and it was a cost. I said, why can't we just have this happen? So if we could, I hate to quote somebody, but can't we all just get along and get this to happen? And if we have a real good capital plan, this can happen. We can forecast, and there'll be bumps in the road where all of a sudden something that was a 5-year projection has to be done. Maybe a boiler was totally shot. We can't anticipate that stuff. But at least there's a plan, we're looking at it, and then you can fall back and say, well, that's in year 4, we're looking to replace a boiler in a particular building. Well, it's year 2, we need to do it now. So we just have to be flexible with those. But there was a good process. It started in December, and we had that pretty much done by January planning.
And for the last 4 years anyway, I think we've responded with a volley of questions to whatever department it is. It's not, I know we keep calling out certain things, but it's just because those examples come to mind. It's not any one person or department in town, for some reason, the entire process.
The other thing, if I may, getting 3 quotes, those of you that have served on boards, contractors do not talk about spinning your wheels. I mean, I've actually had contractors say, when I was in planning, we can't keep giving you quotes because you don't do business with us. It gets extremely difficult to get 3 quotes. It's unusual. So it's not easy. So if we can come up with a good process.
All right, so we've been at it for a little over an hour. We've gotten through 2 agenda items. These are very important, I'm not minimizing them. This is what we should be spending time on. But I'd just like to sort of wrap this up. If anybody has any question, whether you represent a department or you're on a board, I think that one thing we can expect, charter change or not, is the budget committee has offered their assistance, and it sounds like you're accepting it. And so this is the time, if anybody has any final questions about the process going forward. Mr. Erickson.
One clarification. Superintendent has always said a book. The problem was that we couldn't get the printed copies, so the board got PDFs, which is not as good, so we would focus on 1 or 2 things. Last year it was the boiler and a couple of other things. This year, they've been very cooperative, because I was...
That's not to mean previous years we weren't, right?
No, but what I'm saying is, because now I've got hard copies for everyone. And it's just a question of, somebody had something else to do at the time, and it was difficult to get it. But it's working, and to speak to the architect review, that's sufficient for a generalized, should we be doing it? But it is not necessarily a high cost item, not necessarily a substitute for multiple estimates from vendors. And, then you raise questions of, we're limited to a certain number of brands or whatever. But I think the real problem here is that we lost do this and the will to do this during the Great Recession and the previous pandemic.
So, as a last note, could I ask that perhaps you collaborate with the town administrator just to get a communication out to all departments, perhaps include a copy of this memo that you drafted, and outline what the timetable is going to be for the review?
Mr. President, for clarification, I heard that the budget committee is willing to assist the planning board. What degree, what level of assistance? I mean, I would like to know now, is the budget committee, to what point would that assistance be? Be willing to take the whole process over, or?
I think I was referring to once the charter changes into effect, so I'm thinking FY 15. But for this year, Mr. Nimbarano did say that he'd be happy to, act as a liaison with the planning board or sit down with one of them and go over the capital budget and explain to them how it works and the rest of the world. And I think he'd, be happy to attend. He can't attend the meeting on the 16th because he's going to be out of town that couple of days, but he would have liked to have been there for that. But if one of you touches base with him before then, I think he'll share some information that's going to be useful to you.
Thanks.
Okay, very good. Thank you. We'll move on to item C under this joint workshop, which is discussion, vote, or other action on school committee pre-budget consultation with town council, fiscal year 2015 proposed school department budget, and status of the $240,000 sports contingency funds transfer. And we've grouped a number of things there so that we can have a free-flowing conversation without having to be so topical. And I would just like to start off with, all these processes are dictated by statutes or charter, and this one's no different. The notion of a pre-budget consultation, I just wanted to read some brief statements from the actual state statute. It's Title 16, Chapter 16-2, and refers to the pre-budget consultation at least, and I realize we haven't complied with the time frame here, but as I understand it, the pre-budget consultation, I don't think has really occurred for years, and we're going to try to get it done this year. But it says at least 60 days, but not more than 90 days prior to the formal submission of the school department budget to the appropriate city or town officials by the school committee, there shall be a joint pre-budget meeting between the school committee and the city or town councils. And then there's two things that I'm going to really highlight that need to occur. So at or before this meeting, number one, the highest elected official of the city or town shall submit to the school committee an estimate prepared in the manner approved by the Department of Administration of projected revenues for the next fiscal year. In the case of the property tax, the projection shall include only changes in the property tax base, not property tax rates. The second thing is the school committee shall submit to the city or town council a statement for the next ensuing fiscal year of anticipated total expenditures, projected enrollments with resultant staff and facility requirements, and any necessary or mandated changes in school programs or operations. And then some other things as well. I just wanted to cite that as the context for the official pre-budget consultation. I don't expect that we're actually going to spend a lot of time discussing this, but we're open to it, and if anybody would like to, we can. And so with that, I was going to turn it to the superintendent, Mr. Limber, if you have anything you'd like to offer on this agenda. Okay.
Pretty straightforward.
Okay. And I think some of the material has actually already been communicated via email. And I believe that Brenda, as finance director, you've provided what's required in the statute to the
So
school
we have
department.
to do a 5-year projected forecast for the state. And Lisa did her part, and I did mine, and I have to combine and send it to the state. But at that point, I didn't realize I needed to send it to Lisa, so I did send that over to her last
Okay.
week.
And does the administration have everything that it needs from the school department?
The only thing would be under Title 16 also, the same, you were reading from that, Title 16, I believe.
okay with what they gave you, or you think it should be a different format?
Yeah.
Okay,
It's the same format that was sent to the state, so it's not
okay,
Yeah, no, we got clarification.
okay.
But I know going forward that once she sends her part to me, and I combine it, that I also have to send the final
Okay.
to her. She already had her school part.
Do you ever get a copy of that, the budget plan?
I can give you a copy of it.
But the part that the TA said wasn't provided was in November, so. I think Brenda just said that.
Yeah.
Before that,
Yeah, because we have to have it in 30 days after, 30.
Is there anything else to be said on the pre-budget consultation?
Yes.
Mr. Erickson?
I think it's vitally important that the pre-budget consultation, you make a decision as to what your operating budget is going to be, and what the limits of your capital budget is going to be. Because you could throw in school roofs or anything else, that will blow out the budget, just as Lincoln is doing now. But it's just not feasible. So if you have a capital, 1.8 million or whatever it is, we need to know that up front so that we don't do what otherwise we consider pie in the sky. It may be absolutely necessary, but you
It
can't.
raises a really good point, because I think that for the planning board, I think, I can be, correct me if I'm wrong, but that it's not necessarily their job to determine what the town can afford. It's their job to evaluate what needs to get done, to put it in some kind of a priority order. And then it comes to the council, and then the council has to decide what it's gonna fund,
And
and
that's
what,
just our
and what our
recommendation.
capacity is.
You can do whatever you want with that recommendation, once that's reached the town council.
well, that's why capital should be really early.
So so now we can, anybody wants to discuss? Yes. Yes.
In the last 10 years, how much money?
Sorry, could you just identify yourself for the record, please?
David Lowe, 80 Highview Avenue, North Smithfield. In the last 10 years, through the capital budget program, how much money has ever been granted to the school department in the capital budget? Does anybody have that number or offhand?
I don't have the research. I'm guessing it was very minimal, if anything.
For the record, I have a pending request of the finance director, and I'm expecting that information in the next few weeks. I asked for the last thing.
Evidently, it's very, very little in that process, and the need to do this improvement is immense.
And that's why we're
right now
having
it's
this
in the
conversation,
funds.
so we can go forward with a process that's gonna work for everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For the record, I do remember 32 million for our middle school.
Anybody have any questions or comments regarding the fiscal 2015 proposed school department budget? Budget committee.
I'm sorry, can we address the pre-budget meeting?
We can, I'm trying to keep us on schedule.
Well, one of the things that we'd like to see, last year we gave the council a printout, a table that we had collated the information from all the other communities and the percentage raises and increased budgets that all the communities were looking for. And we're following through this year by calling those districts and finding out how much they actually ended up getting as a percentage. And they were all all the budgets that were submitted last year were under cap. And they ranged from a negative number percentage increase to a high of like 4 points, school department's asking for. However, when we were looking at that stuff online, because we go online to the district and try to find the budget online first, and if we can't, then we call and try to get the number we're looking for. We're looking at that, we notice that a lot of school districts include and forward to the town administrator and the town council fiscal impact statements, not just for collective bargaining agreements, but for any type of employment contract or extension. And I know that, the one that I saw that jumped out at me was one of the districts, it was the administrative contracts, and it listed the person's name, the new terms of the contract, and the fiscal impact of that. And it was one sheet with all of the administrators separately listed on that statement. And when I sent an email to the person who I saw that on the budget, they said, well, we're required to by law, it's under the fiscal impact statements. And 16-2, -21.6, and it does say that there's, for individual employment or the whole thing. So I'd like to see, I think the school department just, in the summer, it looked like, on the agenda, you had administrative contracts. And I'm assuming if you gave raises and wrote through terms. So could we get an impact statement on those contracts?
You get my contract statements and the contracts and all the actually financial information in the budget too, so you can have it all.
Well, I think the law says you have to give a fiscal impact statement, though. I don't want to have to pick it apart, and I would just like to see point blank, this is, what everybody was given, and this is out of that. Okay. And the other thing was, is it appropriate at this pre-budget meeting to discuss dates of when we're going to actually meet? Or is that supposed to come down the pipe? Because Mr. Scunzio's letter said that they'd be happy to meet and everything. And last year, we had some difficulties coordinating, and I was thinking of, could we ask tonight that they give us, some dates for the month of March, so starting the second, third, and fourth week of March, where we could meet with the school committee and review the budget for the line items?
I would think that if people aren't, if they don't have calendars, and is that something that we can do through a doodle poll?
Or could they do it at the next meeting? And we're looking at the second, third, or fourth week in March, and we're looking at either Tuesdays, Thursdays, or Saturdays.
Mr. President, I think that's a fair question, because that letter from Attorney Scunzio was December 20th, and in it he actually said, please note that the school committee and the superintendent are available to review budget documents with the budget committee and town council. It also goes on to say, pursuant to Rhode Island General Law 16-2-21, the committee respectfully requests that the mandatory pre-budget consultation with the town council take place immediately.
That's what we're doing.
Yep, I get it, so let's get it to happen.
Okay.
Isn't that what this is?
Yeah, but I see, I'm throwing up more questions on the side here. Do we have this information? So we need to be a little bit more transparent on information.
Yeah, I don't follow you. I think the pre-budget meeting details were explicit in Attorney Scungio's letter, so I'm a little lost
Oh,
about.
maybe I'm lost.
I don't know.
I could be too.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think you nailed it in terms of the pre-budget information. So, yeah.
Could I make one other statement about what we're expecting to see as far as the budget? We do want a line item detailed budget by line item from every department and the prior year expenditure histories. We would like this year to receive both hard copies, the original binder like we received last year from the municipal side and the binder from the school board side. But we'd also like electronic files of every spreadsheet that's included in that budget. We asked for them last year, we weren't given to them under the Open Meetings Act. If a PDF file exists in electronic format, you're supposed to be able to get it. It was extremely cumbersome for us to manually recreate every spreadsheet that we needed to try to work off of. So if we could get those electronic formats this year, that would really help our task. The last thing is, we had a discussion with the council.
But before you move on to that, let me just facilitate the discussion.
Okay.
Is there a reason why providing the electronic?
Well, it's a little confusing because we can provide anything in a PDF document, any Excel spreadsheet, all the data, the whole budget book in a PDF. I'm a little confused because it sounds like the request is for our actual Excel spreadsheets within which we do formulas and all of that information. And to me, it doesn't matter, who's asking for it.
So we need
that's
clarification
how
on
it
the
works.
idea of it being electronic and whether it's Excel or PDF. Tell me why, how would it be a benefit to have an Excel spreadsheet versus a PDF?
Because then we wouldn't have to, bring it somewhere and have it converted from a PDF to an Excel. Last year, we manually had to do it because nobody had
So
software.
what are you doing with an Excel format that you need? Tell me more about what you're
Well,
doing.
what we did was we built.
Okay, from like an audit standpoint, where in my expertise is, if we want to play with the numbers, not for any reason, but just to check numbers, to verify them, if we have the formulas in the document the way they are, then we can see exactly what's going on as far as the other side. And we don't have to guess at what the formula is, where it comes from. As far as it being an Excel document, they have a certified copy. When they send it,
it would just state that, it would have some kind of disclaimer on it saying that it's for, purposes for budgeting. And it would not impact their Excel spreadsheet at all. It would just be for us so that we would know, like, if a formula's wrong, if there's something that we need to put in so it's quick. Otherwise, sitting there and trying to determine what formula was in there to determine something, and then we make an answer for something, if we're addressing something, then we may be wrong because our formula might not be the exact same thing as they have.
Is that a reasonable request?
I think what I prefer to have a smaller discussion with people from the budget committee with their concerns, because obviously the flip side, you can appreciate our concerns, which is if we share it, whether it's the budget committee or John Q. Public, who takes our Excel work and changes a formula unbeknownst to them, and all of a sudden we get hit, well, what happened here, what happened there? Now we have to go through an immense amount of work to find out what somebody did or changed. So I would much rather make it a smaller conversation, so.
Let me just first ask if anybody in the council has any questions.
I have, on this particular discussion, as a professional, I would never let my Excel out the office. It's a PDF format and that's it. And if you want to work with the PDF, fine, but my Excel is my proprietary information that I put together, and I wouldn't want the risk of somebody else manipulating that Excel and then passing it off as an original. Now, if somebody can show me a process whereby they can certify that one version is the original version and date stamp and all that, I still don't get a lot of comfort from that. And I personally won't do it. I never have done it, and I will not do it going forward. So in my particular line of business, and it's kind of a related line of business, I do deal with numbers once in a while. So, I can understand what the concerns are of the school committee. I can understand the budget board wants to run numbers and they want to do what-if calculations and they want to see what this, that, or the other thing is. But I really think if you want to do that, it's up to you to develop your own Excel spreadsheet, because the master Excel, just like on the administration side, the master Excel has to be controlled by the people creating those Excel files. And they can't be let out in a format where they can be manipulated. That's just grounds for real trouble, both legally, accounting-wise, auditing-wise, and a whole host of other things. That's just my opinion.
Anybody else on the council?
What do I know?
Anybody else on the council first? I did want to ask Mr. Harrison if he has any questions.
I spent 9 years on the budget board with CPA, and I completely respect Mr. Yazbak's position because he is dealing with proprietary formulas which give him market advantage. And in my field, I would do the same thing. But when it's a public document and they can keep the original copy, the most important thing is to allow sensitivity testing, to allow analysis of the formulas. And we found over that period of ultimately agreeing to release everything, we found a number of formulas that were wrong or misunderstood, and it gave us an enormous capability to learn together how to make it better. And as a result, we have a spreadsheet that the financial town meeting can recalculate instantly with all the ripple effects, but it took all kinds of scrutiny by the budget board members to make that, bring that to the level that it is now. So I would say that is absolutely critical for the budget board to have that. They keep the original. If there's any question about discrepancy, they have their certified original.
Mr. Whitman.
Yeah, my name is John McCoy. I'm new to the process. I'm not an accountant, I'm an actuary. If you don't know what an actuary is, it's an accountant with a heart. My former job before I retired was the chief actuary. And my job was to make, to do rate changes throughout all the United States. And the insurance departments would always ask us for our Excel worksheets. So I don't understand it. I can understand having a proprietary one when you're in a private business, but we were dealing with the public, and we were required by the insurance department to give us our Excel worksheets. Do you understand the difference between an Excel worksheet and a PDF? Okay.
Yeah, but you are being regulated by those people.
Absolutely
All
correct.
right, the budget board is not regulating the school department, the budget board is not regulating the town administration and the town offices that There's the big difference. And I think with all due respect to Mr. Erickson, you know, unless those Excel spreadsheets can be password protected so they're not manipulated in some way that's guaranteed, I would be very reluctant to letting those things up. Why should it be the school departments now or the town administrator to defend their original Excel because somebody manipulated 4 or 5, reiterations ago, or 3 or 4 months ago? It's just going to be an enormous task. Now, if the planning board, the budget board, and the school department and the administration want to sit down and they want to go through what the theory is of an Excel spreadsheet and what the formulas are in the background of it, and everybody comes to an agreement as to how the thing works or should work, go at it. But to just, you know, carte blanche, take my Excel spreadsheet and do what you want with it, that's a recipe for disaster. Just my opinion. Everybody else, I'm a 1 of 5.
Then of course, there's the matter of the law. And for that, I would turn to, not to put you on the spot, Mr. Solicitor, but I don't know if you have knowledge of that off the top of your head. There's the issue of whether or not an Excel spreadsheet produced is, whether you can request it through the APRA.
Well, how I would look at it is it's a public document. So therefore, it's public funds are used to produce that document, and that document is public. I mean, especially with an internal board. Now, an APRA request would actually be different. I'm looking at it as it's an internal board. It's requesting the information that has the power to review those documents. So I would agree with the budget board on that.
I don't know that, I will.
One point I'd like to make you aware of is that 75% of our budget is done in our accounting software package, and we do have a tool that will convert that to Excel. But when it converts it to Excel, it puts it in all of the cells, but there are no formulas. We do have some, reports that we do as far as salaries and benefits for justification purposes that we create ourselves that have formulas. But the other ones, we will not see formulas in.
This would allow the data to be added or subtracted in various formats, and you're not worried about, all you're giving us is data in Excel, rather than your Excel worksheets.
That'd be better.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ms. Jones.
Well, I think also one of the things that we need to keep in mind here is that providing the budget committee with Excel spreadsheets, ones with flat data and ones with formula, it allows the budget committee to ask certain questions if they have the formulas in front of them without having to go back and ask you constantly, well, what about this, what about that? They can look at the formula and say, all right, well, things are tight, what if we reduce this by 1/4%, if that's what your formula is representing? And it allows them to do a lot of what-if scenarios. In terms of concerns about keeping the original spreadsheets clean, there are plenty of features in Excel for information rights management. There are lots of them in there. I would be more than happy to talk to people about them if they would like to know about them, because I know a lot about Excel. There are a lot of different ways to protect your information, all sorts of different ways. That shouldn't be an issue. There's absolutely no reason to be concerned about things getting damaged that way in Excel.
Okay, just to remind folks, it's 8:45. We are on the third subtopic on the first agenda item. If there is anything further with respect to the fiscal 2015 proposed school department budget or the status of the $240,000 sports contingency fund transfer, I'd like to, I don't want to rush through it, but I'd like to move through it. And I would turn to the town administrator first. Well, you may think I'm rushing, but the reality is we've got a defined amount of time to cover a certain amount of material. And I'm the guy that has to make sure that we get it done by 10 o'clock.
Okay, well, I received the budget from the school department for fiscal 15, and at least looking at it initially, and I'm going to read this because I want to make sure I get all my points. It doesn't appear to conform to the requirements of state law. State law and town charter reference the need for budgets to be balanced with expenditures equal to requested revenue. Now, while the FY15 school department budget submitted on December 20th request revenues of $24,260,793,000, which is within the 4% cap allowed by state law, because this year we're also, not allowed to present anything more than 4%. The expenditures contained in the budget, $27,073,573, must be equal to the revenue requested, and therefore must be reduced by $2,812,000. The North Smithfield School Committee, as we all do, has to comply with state law, as all Rhode Island communities are required to do. And the reason we were told by Attorney Scunzio, he sent us a letter referencing that several budget items that would be difficult to forecast, like special education, out-of-district placements, special education services, charter school, and transportation costs, etc. And I know that a lot of school districts struggle with that, and I really hope that they, this school department and school committee can comply with the requirements of the law. And unfortunately, I can't accept it because it is not a balanced budget. So I'm going to request that they have 30 days to submit a balanced budget.
Would request that put in writing as well?
Oh, sure.
With the reasons, specific reasons. If I may, sorry, our attorney felt differently, that we did submit to meet the requirement, we recognized that the budget would have to be reduced by our and so for the sake of discussion, I think the letter expressed it pretty explicitly, for the sake of discussion and trying to move forward in terms of getting at educational as well as financial issues. We wanted to have a discussion on the needs of the school department. So that's why I think it's important that the TA respond in writing so that the team can review the reasons.
What I hope we can avoid, and I realize that Mr. Scungio has opined and our solicitor has opined, I'm hoping that we can find a way to get a budget that the budget committee can actually dig into, because if it's turned either them or the administration to make judgment calls on what of the 2.8 to cut, that's really not a function for the administration of the budget committee. So
We'll comply. We just want the rejection in writing with the specific reasons for a lot of different reasons.
I guess I may ask, why couldn't you do that in the first place?
I would again, we're getting into the budget discussion now. So at this point, I would just ask your indulgence in directing communication through the chair, just so that I can maintain some support. Yes.
Why didn't you do that in the first place, if that was something that can be done easily? We know it's 4%. We're all stuck at that 4%.
Yeah.
We have to live within the 4%. If we all as a town looked at all the things, every one of these people in town could say that they had a wish list of things that they would like to have, and so would the municipal side, and so would the school side. We know it's tough, we know it's hard, but we have a law that we have to adhere to, and I don't know why we have to give another 30 days, and everybody knows it's 4%, and it has to balance. And we're sympathetic and sensitive to the fact that there have been a lot of things in the past that haven't been addressed. We're trying to change that. We're trying to make some issues, bring issues to light so that they're not held back anymore. But I don't understand why we couldn't get it in the first place.
Yeah, you know what, I think it's pretty clear in the response that it was sent with the budget. I think the fact of the matter, in our perspective about adequate funding the last 5 or 6 years is a chasm, it's a world apart. And so I think what the school committee tried to do and what the attorney tried to explain to you was that this is a real serious matter. And honestly, those people who want to read between the lines can read clearly that 4% will not cut it. So I understand your position. We will flip it around, and once we get your letter, we will resubmit it. It's supposed to be 30 to 60 days after the pre-budget consultation, so technically we had that tonight, which is great. So now we'll meet your needs. But we'll flip the budget around and we'll give it to you the way it's been difficult for all of us. So we'll do that. Likewise, you know, I guess we could improve communication across the board.
Yes,
You'll have to go.
I will
Sorry.
to it.
But we went through this last year, and we're playing the same game again this year. And I don't mean to be disrespectful when I say that, but there's no other way to state it plainly. There was no other school district in the state that we are aware of that was on the sheet that we gave to the town council, that we presented on the overhead, that submitted a budget that wasn't in compliance with the law. They were all balanced budgets, and they were all, what we were aware of, within the 4% of the cap. If every other district in the state can do it, I don't understand what's so unique about North Smithfield that we can't do it. It's the law. And you know what? Enough said. We delayed months last year, and I'm glad she put a time limit of within 30 days, because we've got to, move forward with the budget.
So a letter will go, presumably tomorrow, and then 30 days later, we'll have a budget that conforms to the expenses that are within the 4% cap. Ms. Conlon.
I know there's a lot of people here who just want to speak or talk to the 240,000. It is 852. I just point that out. I think
Yes.
a lot of people I know really can't talk about it.
I appreciate somebody who wants to help me to move the agenda along. So, do you have anything you would like to say about the 240, or?
I'll defer to the chairman. Well, I think there's a letter that's in place. I'll leave.
I think we're just waiting for a response at this point. We've gotten a letter from Attorney Stanchio regarding the 240, and we're just waiting for a response from you.
Okay.
And I would perhaps that, first of all, one of my daughters participates in the middle school cross-country program. We're running a cross-country program at the middle school. Other towns aren't even doing that, so we are, and they had 100 kids come out with the middle school cross-country program. We're running a great program right now. Just point that out, this money is very well used to keep the sports going. Again, there's a lot of kids who have interest.
And they are going in this budget cycle. Madam Administrator, do you have anything to add?
Yes, I do actually. In our meeting on June 17th, we had the public hearing, and I don't know if any of you were here as residents, but we had a PowerPoint presentation, kind of explaining what was going on with taxes and how they would come about, and what the percentages of each, capital was and whatnot. And on page 19 of that, and there are some if you want to take copies of it, the guys, it states, and this was information that was passed on to me through the town council in a decision they made to hold out of the budget $240,000, and it was called a sports contingency. And I will just read it to you, and you can take it if you need it. The FY 2014 includes the addition of line items for contingency infrastructure and contingency sports. These budget line items were added this year to cover infrastructure improvements throughout the town, as well as an amount to fund school sports, should the school department be unable to fund the program with their existing allocation. These total approximately $400,000 that was not included in last year's budget. We then asked, so the concept that I understood from the council was that if the school department could not run a sports program with the allocation they received, which was the 23 million, then so as to ensure that there would be sports, they said that this money would be held in a contingency account to be used for that if that was the case, that the school department could not provide a full sports program. Then there was a high school program, but there was budget, yes. It includes sports, yes. And then that's where the communication goes.
I did ask for a copy of the minutes from the June 17th town council meeting where this was discussed, and it is consistent with what the town administrator just articulated. So I think that the feeling was that it was there in the event that it was needed in order to run the program, that the budget presented was balanced and included the program. So I'm not sure on what basis the 240 would be transferred. It's unclear to me what the purpose of that 240 would have been if the budget was already balanced.
Mr. Flaherty, then why would we get a letter from the town administrator in July saying that once we had reconciled our budget to the appropriation, including telling the town administrator we were providing a full sports program, she would transfer the money? Why would we get a letter like that?
I can only go by the minutes of the council.
And then after the fact, sir, we received 4 more requests for financial information, we provided it, and we requested the transfer again, and we didn't get it for months, so I'm confused why we would get a letter like that, so.
If that was the case, there should have been 240 short, and we would have filled it. Or a certain amount short that would have been for sports. That was what the intent of the council, I was told, was. I was relaying that information.
Since this idea originated with the budget committee, I'd like to jump in and explain it. We explained it to the budget committee the same way that is reflected in the minutes. We said, if they're unable to provide sports with the $23,604,000, then that money will be there as a contingency fund. If they need $20,000 of it to finish the sports program, 50, 200, or 240,000. And actually, I recall when we were presenting it and discussing it, either at the meeting on the 17th or 20th or one of those meetings, I actually said, who knows? You know, they may get additional revenue unbeknownst to us, or their expenditures might be less than what we anticipate them to be, and they might be able to reconcile the budget on that dollar amount. And they did. So we were quite clear with what was going to happen, and we're in complete agreement with the administration and what's reflected in the minutes of the town council meeting and what was presented on the PowerPoint overhead that we all looked at and saw and read. It was clear to me, and everybody who could read that PowerPoint, that it was a contingency fund should they not be able to provide sports within the appropriation given to them. And they did provide sports within the appropriation. I'm not going to drag through the whole budget, but I would just like to point out that by reducing 7 line items in their budget, which we believed were over budgeted, above and beyond what they had ever expended in those line items, most of them dealing with utility and transportation and fuel consumption and such, within those 7 line items, they were able to reduce approximately $400,000. They only had to reduce the budget to bring it down to the appropriation that they were given by $457,000. And they, with an 8th line item that they factored in there, they saved another $135,000 in health care. So those cuts that they made totaled about $540,000. Now, they didn't have to cut that total amount, but when they actually reduced their budget and reconciled it, they made those reductions on those line items, but added 2 other line items that were well above what they had ever requested. So I'm just saying, you know, it wasn't that $400,000 did not, if they cut other programs, it was to put money in different line item accounts, because they saved the $400,000 in 7 line items as far as we can see.
It's not that I'm disinterested in that part of the explanation, but I'm focused on really the minutes from the council meeting, what action we took, and didn't see where we really even had the right to transfer. But I would defer to anybody in the council to jump in. Anybody?
Do we have a concern about maintenance of the grade as well, when we were looking at this? Yes?
I'm unclear as to if the transfer occurred, if it had occurred, what would have been useful, because that would not have been reflected in the budget, so. Does anybody?
I gotta be honest with you, I thought the same. I thought we put it aside to give had sports. That's what I thought it was for too. And then we heard what was in the minutes, but the way I understood it was we take 240 out, and when they have sports, we're gonna give it back to them for the sports, because they put it in. That's what I understood.
That's not what you said.
Well, I'm just saying, I wanna be honest, you know, it's not gonna probably be a popular thing, but that's exactly what I understood.
We, as a council, had the opportunity to amend those minutes before we approve them. And all I can do is just go by what we have in minutes. Those are minutes approved by the council. I'm hard pressed to go back and change the intent.
Mr. President, for the record, I didn't vote for the budget for a number of reasons. Biggest being that I didn't think the school department had the funding that they needed to do the programs that they are mandated to perform. Having said that, and I'm not trying to throw a monkey wrench into it, but the way the budget was adopted and the way the school department was funded, it would seem to me that the school department would have to show a deficit of at least $240,000 and go through the process of the state law that they're operating under a deficit, and then it would be up to the council to fill the bucket. I tried to express those concerns at the time in which we adopted the budget, but either I failed to communicate properly or I failed to fully make fellow councilors aware of what my concerns were. But in any case, the budget was adopted on a 4-to-1 vote, and I did not adopt it. There's a 4-to-3.
3-2.
I'm sorry, maybe I apologize. So having said that, you know, it is what it is, and right now, it's a mess. And I can see where it's going. I predicted where it was going last June, and it's all coming to fruition. And we just have to go down the road, I think, and get to the bottom of it.
I think that's bottom line. Get to the bottom.
Anything else on this topic before we move on?
Okay.
Okay.
Up there. I can't come down to the podium because I have a bad knee, but I can talk loud. I'm Tracy Nangle, 3 Indigo Farm Road. I did attend some of those meetings and tried to understand what was going on, and there was a back and forth about the 240. My honest understanding of it was that it was held back because in the town, historically, there's been a debate about whether or not sports have been held out as something that could bring up emotion in respects to the school and the budget, and that was trying to be avoided by all parties, and so the money was put aside. My understanding from going to the meetings was that our school department has to submit a balanced budget by a certain date, and so the agreement, sort of a gentleman's agreement, was that they would present a balanced budget showing that they would fund sports, and that was the condition by which they would then receive the 240 that was taken out, so that there wouldn't be we wouldn't play out in the newspaper that sports were being held back and that people were, you know, trying to push hot buttons. Because I've lived here a long time and the hot buttons have been pushed over and over again for a number of different reasons. So I'm just saying that I am a teacher, I will give that, I am a teacher, but as a person who pays taxes in town, my understanding is that everybody has to present a balanced budget to the state by July 15th, right? The town does, and everyone else has to balance theirs. They're not allowed to put in an unbalanced budget. Am I right or am I wrong? I'm right, right? They have to? Or else they have to add paperwork why they're not. And so that was my understanding. Now, I may have misunderstood. I'm just saying that I know that I attended the meetings and I tried to understand. And as an average person, that was my understanding.
Thank you. Again, we'll have to come back to what we have before.
In the minutes, I get that.
Different people are going to have different interpretations, but the minutes are the minutes, and if they weren't changed, you have to follow the minutes. So I think that I'm going to move on to the next item, which is a special joint workshop of the town council with other boards, town boards and commissions. And the discussion item is discussion vote or other action regarding